So welcome back again. I hope all of you are back and ready for the next part. Yeah. So we spoke about the normal traffic. Any question you have now? Of course, I will give you maybe 5 or 7 more minutes after this session also, so that if you have anything more to discuss, we can do it at that time. So the highlight I wanted to give, so we spoke about the normal traffic, right, which is the production traffic. We also spoke about the so-called internet background radiation or unsolicited packets, which are primarily due to malicious activities. We also showed WannaCry as a typical example where what sort of traffic was coming to port number 445 when WannaCry was really in the process of spreading. So you can see here, right? That is the normal pattern when the spreading happens. How we could effectively get a pattern which can be quite easily differentiated. You don't want any too much of advanced techniques to differentiate this because it is pretty clear from that. So the key point I wanted to say here in the context of internet background radiation is that IBRs are valuable asset for gathering cyber intelligence, right? It is not just typically on any network, they are not respected or they are not processed or analyzed. But even a small darknet or a network telescope receives a notable amount of IBR, which needs to be collected, analyzed, and it can be used for valuable information, right? Yeah. So all of you with your very basic background on network traffic analysis itself can look whether you get unsolicited packet on your devices connected to the internet. The only thing is that you will say, I don't have IP addresses which are not used. But you can even look at cases like, for example, as I said, a DNS request coming to a printer. Those sort of things you can have a preliminary look and then try to get a much better picture on what sort of activities are being attempted through that process. Now, if you look at internet background radiation, you will see quite a number of interesting patterns, those who already know protocol details. See, there are cases where you get packets, which the IP has a protocol field, right? The protocol field of IP is supposed to reflect the next higher level protocol that the packet should be processed. But we will see a very interesting phenomena in there. You get a much different values there, which will actually be of no use to the end system. See, you see a packet where the value of protocol field is 255, which is non-existent, right? Because as of now, the address allocation team, or I forgot its full name, has not assigned 255 for anything. Okay? So we have got huge number of such packets because that itself indicates that these packets are fabricated not by a standard kernel, rather by a proprietary mechanism of preparation of packet, right? So you can see here, it says this is supposed to be TCP and then the number, but rather it says 255 unknown. And it is not just 1 or 2 packets. As I said, we have lakhs of such packets coming. So it would be very interesting to see what is the motivation, whether a customized program is generating it or is it being really generated by the kernel. So this is one of the unusual pattern you can see. And we know TCP flags are used in certain combination, right? For example, if you have a packet where sync flag is set on, you will not also have the RST flag. Do you see a packet with both sync and RST on? Sync packet and RST on? No, right? Because sync is to establish a connection. In the same request, nobody will put saying that I wanted to terminate the connection also, right? But you can see packets, SREWs, sync, reset plus few other flags also, right? Similarly, sync and fin, which is normally not generated by any standard protocol. So why these things are coming, sort of stuff would be a very interesting question how much it is coming, how frequently it is coming. Is it coming from various IP addresses or is it coming only from one particular corner of a world? Today it might be coming only from certain region, and as you progress, you would see at a later stage, it is getting spread into more and more region. So what it indicates, initially it originated from there, the benefit was found, and probably subsequent to that, it got spread more and more. So this sort of flag level analysis, okay, of unsolicited packets gives you very vital or very important information in terms of from where it is, where a bad trend is initially originating from. Next, I will talk to you about the so-called next generation transport protocol. So in the beginning we discussed transport protocol, right? And you all answered me two transport protocol. What are they? TCP and UDP. But the transport layer of the internet has gone substantial modification or substantial changes in the past 7-8 year period, and the journey is being continued now. Okay. So one of the innovation is called multi-path TCP. Right? What does it mean? Multi-path TCP. Okay. Now, why do we need, see, the word TCP is still there. So obviously you will assume that it is something derived from TCP for a certain specific purpose. TCP is quite well known. We know it is how old? Maybe 40 or 50 year or whatever. I don't remember when was the first official RFC released. But the biggest problem with TCP is that it is a single path protocol. What do you mean by a single path protocol? Even if a device, for example your mobile phone, has multiple network interface card, TCP connection can use only one of them, one of the paths at a given point in time, right? Now this was not a problem because when TCP was initially designed, most of the devices had only one network interface card. If you have only one network interface card, you will only have one connection, right? You cannot connect it to two devices or whatever. But today, is that the scenario? Today you have a mobile phone. How many interfaces it has? It has a Wi-Fi. It has a 3G, 4G or whatever cellular interface, right? It also has a Bluetooth, right? So you have multiple interfaces on your pocket device today, whether it is your tab, whether it is your laptop. Now if you run TCP on that, no problem. It will use one of the paths. Okay, next connection you can use a different path. But you imagine a scenario where you wanted to use both the paths simultaneously for a given application. For example, you are here, you have a good Wi-Fi signal now, you chat with somebody, your connection is on, TCP connection is established. Now you wanted to move, you moved out, you are no more in Wi-Fi, right? Because you moved out of VIT, so you cannot use VIT Wi-Fi anywhere. So what do you expect at that time? Your cellular should automatically take over from there, right? But can the same TCP connection get migrated from this to that? The answer is no. Okay, it has to be either handled by application or it has to be handled by some crude way of load sharing at a lower level. It doesn't do congestion control, all sort of stuff. So in order to address this limitation, okay, Internet Engineering Task Force has worked on a relatively new protocol called MPTCP, which is Multi-Path Transmission Control Protocol. The whole idea is that even if you have multiple network interface cards, you should be able to use all of them simultaneously for a given application transfer, right? Yeah. So this is describing the problem. Why TCP is a problem? Of course, we all love TCP, right? Even today, what we use is TCP. So we cannot say that it is not done its job, but at the same time, we emphasize the fact that it has its own limitation in terms of path. So this is a scenario, host A and B, both of them have two network interface card. So they should be able to use both, but TCP allows you to use only one for a given connection. Correct? I would also say here, TCP is the most complicated protocol on the internet. Many things that we spoke, like recovery from packet loss, packet reordering, packet corruption, congestion control, flow control, all these activities are done by TCP. So finding an alternate to TCP with multipath was not a easy job because you are touching the core protocol on the networking. So it has taken quite a bit of time for Internet Engineering Task Force. There was a specific group called Multipath TCP group, which actually designed this MPTCP in a smart manner. Okay. And I hope all of you know about the internet congestion collapse, how the congestion control was done and all, right? Because when initially TCP was used, it did not have the congestion control. So what was happening is that every host was transmitting at a high rate than what the network can handle, right? So if I speak too fast, what would happen? You would not be able to follow, right? So how do I find out what is the rate at which I should talk to you? What is the best way I can ascertain the speed at which I am talking is acceptable to you? Correct. So I have to ask, right? So I need to get the feedback, right? So I need to do a congestion control. Otherwise, I will bombard in one side. In the case of computer networking, the packet will get dropped in between. Okay. In your case, you will be in a different world, and nothing will. Effective communication will not take place. So this is what has happened on internet. Something called a congestion collapse, where the capability. Okay, of course, it is in 1986 or somewhere. What the network had a capability of 32 kilobits per second, but the throughput has come down to something like 40 bits per second. Imagine, because congestion control was not implemented, and then subsequently the additive increase, multiplicative decrease scheme is implemented, and then TCP sustained that congestion collapse sort of problem. So today, not today, this is quite some time ago, TCP had something like about 130 RFCs, main RFC plus related stuff. Now the journey from TCP to MPTCP to solve the multipath problem was not that simple, because TCP had the connection, notion of connection, right? So every endpoint is recognized by a client IP, client port, server IP, and server port. The applications are designed, or the stack is designed in such a manner that if you see a different IP address, that will get blocked. But at the same time, if you have a multipath or a multiple network interface card, your connection should be able to recognize multiple IP addresses as if it belongs to the same connection. So this was one of the big problems. Yeah, we discussed this already. Initially when TCP was designed, it was only single path, but it was not a problem because every device only one device in the old internet had two network interface cards. What is that? Only one device in the internet architecture typically had multiple network interface card at that time. It is a router, right? Because he is connecting two networks. So he receives through one and then he has to pass it to other one. But most of the other devices had only sort of single interface. Now, it is possible to design a completely new protocol called, to solve the single path problem of TCP. But there was another issue. If you design a new protocol with a completely different packet structure and all, it is not easy to make sure that this packet is passing through the intermediate boxes like firewall sort of stuff, right? Because what happens is that the firewall or middle boxes has a fundamental rule. If I get something which I don't understand, maybe there is something risky, drop it. So they all respect and treat TCP very well, no problem, because they are trained to deal with TCP. But the moment they see something which is completely different from TCP, what do? Safer thing is to drop. So this multipath TCP, if it is a new protocol for multipaths, there is a fear that it will never get deployed. You will design it, but your intermediate other solution will slowly kill it and people will stick on to the TCP itself. So IETF wanted to address this, and I would say that it is addressed in a very beautiful manner. So if you look at a packet on the wire, it will look like a TCP packet. So the middle box will not be able to say that no, I am forwarding something which is dangerous. So TCP has a field called option, right? All of you know option field of TCP. This option field of TCP is used, or now it is being expanded also, to pack a completely new protocol called MPTCP. So MPTCP header information can be sometimes as big or slightly bigger than TCP also, I guess. But the point is that you put all of them in one field of TCP called option field. And if required, you expand the option field a little more so that all requirement can be taken care. Now what is the advantage of this? Packet will look like it is a TCP packet, so nobody will drop it. And who drops it otherwise? Your firewall, IDS, IPS, all of them say, oh, I am seeing something which is not great, drop it. So this way, passing through the middle box has become a relatively easier job. Okay. Now, what are the MPTCP options that is packed in the option field? These are the things called MP capable, MP join. Anybody who is interested more about it can go and read the MPTCP RFC. You know about RFC, right? Request for comments. So it will give you all the details of that. And these signals are regularly exchanged inside the TCP packet. In a way, you can say it is a sort of encapsulation, right? So this is a comparison of conventional TCP and MPTCP stack. What you see on the left side is your application, normal layer, application with socket interface, then TCP IP, then network interface, right? What you see on the right side is again application, then you have an MPTCP layer, which is very much within the transport layer. Then you have something called a subflow. Each subflow will actually look like a TCP, right? Then below that you have an IP, right? So the core of the notion is that you have something called a subflow. So if you have two network interface card, if you have two paths, you will establish two TCP flows. Okay, each one is called a subflow of MPTCP. So you can have an MPTCP connection which consists of multiple TCP subflows. So here is the pictorial representation, right? You have NIC1, NIC2, and assume you have NICN, and then you can have N subflow. But what is the beauty? They all are TCP flows, but they all are connected together. They all are used for transmitting a single application data. Now, how is it possible? How do we do the congestion control? How do we do the flow control? For example, you have data, say a portion is transmitted through this, a remaining is transmitted through this. How do you assemble them in the right order? Right? So, I think I have a few more slides on that. Yeah, I will come to that, yeah. So, what happens is that it always starts with one flow called initial flow. That is the first subflow, okay. So, the first subflow is established normal, what you see on the top phase is the normal TCP connection establishment, sync ACK, and ACK. Now, the same thing if you look at it in the MPTCP framework, how would it look? It has a sync plus there is an MP capable, right? This MP capable goes where? Correct. It sits in the option field of TCP, but it is an MPTCP option, okay? Now, if he is also capable of MPTCP, what would he do? He will reply with a sync ACK because it's also a TCP connection, but you will also have a MP capable option in the reply. So now these two ends know, both of them are MPTCP capable, okay? Then you will establish there is a key exchange to make sure that nobody is spoofing it in between, sort of stuff. Now your connection is established, and this connection is MPTCP connection. Now what do we mean by saying it is an MPTCP connection? It can now open additional subflows and attach to the main flow, right? So here is how an additional subflow is created. The first one is your initial flow, then you send this point is what you should note, MP join. Means your second flow is constructed or created in such a manner that you are making him to join and become part of the first flow, okay? Then and correct. So after that, it stripes the data across multiple flows and it uses something called a data sequence signal for this purpose. So you will have a, see, the traditional TCP has only one sequence space, right? So here you will see a data sequence number, which is a sequence number across entire MPTCP subflow. So that is uniformly this one. Now, we were doing a security analysis of MPTCP protocol. So one of our question is that MPTCP is a feedback protocol, right? TCP is a feedback protocol. SCTP is a feedback protocol. MPTCP is also a feedback protocol. What we mean by feedback protocol is the successful data transfer needs the cooperation of both sides. It is not that A sends to B, and if B doesn't send an acknowledgement, gone case, right? You don't communicate further. And now, what is the guarantee by which you make sure that B is responding correctly? So there are scenarios in which we call it as a feedback manipulation attack, where the receiver can misbehave, okay, and cause a damaging effect on the server side, right? For example, the receiver can send a wrong feedback. See, I ask you a question, instead of giving me a right answer, you give me a wrong answer. This wrong answer has an impact on me, okay? I, for example, keep talking faster and faster, okay? And that creates a traffic which is a congestion-like traffic. So we were looking at whether MPTCP is vulnerable to feedback manipulation process or not. And what we concluded is that yes, MPTCP has vulnerability, and there is a new vulnerability called the data sequence signal manipulation, where you give wrong feedback. Instead of giving the correct feedback, you give a wrong feedback, which is typically in the form of acknowledgement, but you spoof or manipulate the data ACK, then subflow sequence number, and then there is one more field, I think that was the window or buffer availability, okay? So if you manipulate these three fields very carefully, you can force a standard MPTCP sender to transmit in a bad or dangerous traffic pattern. So this is the topology that we, so the one beauty is that, or one point you need to remember is that MPTCP is implemented as part of a kernel. So in order to do any of this experiment, one has to modify the Linux kernel, create a new kernel, and then do that. So this is the multipath topology we created. So for example, the very simple, this one, this is a multipath sender. This is the, see, this whole work is published. So if you go to, this is for example published in Elsevier Computers and Security, which is a journal of 5+ impact factor. So you can read the complete stuff there, how the experiment was done, what was our observation, how we did the measurement and all. So here you have MPTCP sender, which we call as MS, which is with multiple network interface cards shown here, right? So it goes through two routers, R1 and R2, and then goes to the switch, and then a multipath receiver. Now these are the parameters. This is how the buffering scheme is arranged. For example, you have the main layer here. This is the MPTCP layer. This is the, there is a scheduler sitting in between, and then you have a buffer or a send buffer for each of them. Why I am showing is that we actually measure the parameters or the dynamics of these levels to see that what is an attack and what is a normal behavior. Yeah. So what we show here is, if you do a normal, what is the transmission rate, and if you do an attack, what is the transmission rate under the same setup. So when I say an attack, all we do is that we replace this MPTCP receiver from a normal receiver to a misbehaving receiver, where the misbehavior is just in manipulating the data sequence signal, subflow sequence number, and window. So what we see is that you can actually make, see, normal scenario, I summarized it here. They transmit over a 1 Gbps link, and then you get something, I mean both of them, whatever we show here, both of them have an emulated link of 1 Gbps, right? Yeah. And then we have created a bottleneck of 1 Mbps. So under normal scenario, how much they can transmit? and then as you spoof, what is the rate at which you can transmit, right? So you can see here, if you do a manipulation, you can actually increase the transmission rate from 0.96 and it goes up further and it again goes up. So the rate at which you generate manipulated signal has an impact on the sender, and sender will be forced to transmit more data. Now these all are some of the internal protocol parameters that one could capture when you do this sort of activities. For example, can somebody say what is this pattern? What is that? It's a sawtooth, right? This is corresponding to what? The AIMD, additive increase, multiplicative decrease pattern of the congestion control, right? For example, what happens is that you transmit, you detect a congestion, you come down, right? So this you are additively increasing, and then there is a sudden decrease, right? Multiplicative decrease. Now what is the flight size here? Yeah, what is the significance? Why do we need a flight size? No idea. No, this is actually the parameter that makes sure that the number of packets that you are transmitted is not exceeding the congestion window, right? Because at any given point of time, what is the maximum you can transmit is decided by the congestion window. So congestion window, the flight size can go up to the congestion window. In a normal scenario, you should get this sort of pattern, right? I think the A is for subflow 1 and B might be for subflow 2. Now, look at here, when you do the manipulation, this pattern is completely lost, right? You can take it this way, and the sender remains the same sender. There is no change in the code or behavior, software running on the MPTCP sender, right? Yeah. And these are various cases where which we showed that congestion control, the flight size can be, congestion window can be taken to any value by turning off some of the parameters inside the protocol. So these are more details I think you will see from the slides, or if you are interested deeper protocol dynamics, I recommend you to go through the paper. Now one interesting parameter or one interesting behavior rather we exposed is called a maliciously induced burst. What is a burst in packet switching? A burst is a series or sequence of back-to-back packet ejected at line rate, correct? You keep sending one packet after the other packet for a period of time. What would happen? It will fill the buffer, okay? And then any more packet coming at that instant will get dropped. So buffer is a problem. Burst is a problem because most of the communication networks are designed with certain level of buffering, correct? But beyond that, if the buffer size increases, the packet will start getting dropped. So there was a lot of effort in TCP design to make sure that the the burst size does not exceed certain level and create an undesired feature. So what we showed is data sequence signal manipulation can be exploited in such a manner you can create this sort of pattern. So what is this? It's a burst, right? You can see in a short time a large number of packet is transmitted one after other. So this is called a maliciously induced burst. Now can you control the burst size is another question we asked. So the answer was yes. You can have, according to the buffer size available, you can also proportionately increase the burst size through certain tactical way of manipulation. This slide? Ah. Could you be louder because there is an AC noise also? Yeah.
There's the rate of growth of the
Rate of?
rate of growth of response time, basically the delayed response time
Ah.
for the acknowledgements.
Ah.
Here it's mostly linear
Ah.
in your attack scenario. Does it ever reach an exponential increase?
No. As you reduce the gap between acknowledgement, proportionately the number of data packet ejected will also increase. For example, as per the congestion control, for one packet, you get only a fixed amount of traffic ejected. But now you control the gap between packet. See, in 1 second, you can send 10 packets, you get a one rate. If you make it 100 packet, you will get 10 times.
But the delay for acknowledgements will always grow at a linear scale, never exponential.
No, that is you are controlling, right? Acknowledgement is generated by you. I mean the malicious guy here. See, the malicious guy is, he can have any distribution, and proportionately a similar distribution will be visible on the traffic also. Only issue is that your acknowledgement should not exceed the sequence number of the data. If you acknowledge something which is not being transmitted, then your acknowledgement will go in its ways, the data transmission will stop. So that is the tactics here. You always acknowledge something which is in the flight. Means the sender has just transmitted, but it has not reached the receiver, but before that you are acknowledging it. You got the point?
Yes.
So there is a delay. You transmit a packet, it has to reach me, right? So that is called the propagation delay. So it is in the flight. At that time itself, then a new acknowledgement comes, you will send a new data, because you thought once it leaves you, you have no idea whether the packet is with you or whether the packet has reached the other side or in the flight. Yeah. So what I wanted to say is that MPTCP security will have a huge impact on the future internet security itself, because this is a protocol which has a high potential to get more and more deployed on the internet, right? So it is possible that today's TCP could probably be replaced future with an MPTCP, correct? And then we actually looked certain mechanism by which how do we prevent the data sequence signal manipulation. So we found a novel mechanism called the data sequence signal skipping. Okay. So it is little advanced aspect. Probably those who are interested in should go through the paper. But what we do is that we skip. See, this is the way we send the data, right? With data sequence signal with a subflow. So we actually skip the map. How the sequence from the MPTCP plane to the subflow plane needs to be mapped. So correspondingly, we will get a different pattern on the other side. So I will show you some implementation details. Yeah. So you can see here, wherever we skip, you will see this sort of patterns. Now, if this is spoofing, if this is for a genuine receiver, right? If you are spoofing, then you will not get this pattern. So what happened is that as you transmit this traffic, you skip the map for few packets in between and then see whether you are getting this behavior or not. If you get this behavior, then it is a good flow. If you don't get this, that is an indication that he is generating acknowledgement without actually seeing the data. So this is a sort of challenge response scheme, but we would call it as an implicit challenge response, because we are not adding any explicit challenge here. We are just, because we don't send any new packets and all. In the existing packet itself, you will slightly do a manipulation so that you don't send more packets, you don't consume more bandwidth, but still you can get a response from the other side to detect his behavior. Right? Now probably we should take 10 minutes to talk about zero trust architecture, right? Okay. Any questions so far? Anything on MPTCP?
So, in the implicit challenge implementation, if this is actually implemented, how will it affect the stateless of the TCP protocol? Because it's connection oriented and is many times used to maintain state in applications. Will skipping packets simply not impact the state?
That's what it actually shows here. When you skipped, you got this, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you transmitted and you covered the skipped map, subsequently it picked up, right? It did not die here. If it would have died here, this would not have been a solution. So the idea is that you skip the map for a short time, then you transmit the map again, and then it regains from there. And it actually doesn't even create a performance degradation, because what you are skipping is only the map. The data is already delivered. So this data will continue to stay in the buffer till the map comes. So what is the problem is, there would be a small delay in terms of the MPTCP layer handing over the data to the application layer. That's all. Okay. But our conclusion is that delay is not going to really impact anything, but at the same time you can capture. But you don't retransmit the data. The data is already transmitted without a map. So data is in the buffer, right? As soon as this map reaches, data get handed over. Yeah. So that's what I summarized here. You can read it. So the solution has these features, okay? Yeah. So we went through quite a bit of attacks possibilities, okay? Countermeasures, including sophisticated attack scenario like data sequence signal manipulation, feedback manipulation. In fact, there was a similar case in which we have tried it for stream control transmission protocol also, but I have not shown that here separately in the interest of time. So this journey continues, right? We try to find out vulnerabilities, close it, and new vulnerability comes that needs to be closed again, sort of scenario. But modern enterprise IT resources are extremely complex, right? It is highly heterogeneous and distributed. You have a mix of resources like on-premise resources, off-premise resources, and all. So overall, handling or managing and then getting some guarantee in terms of the solution is secure is becoming a difficult job. So there is a new thought process which is shifting from the pure thought process to an implementation process called zero trust architecture. So it is basically derived from zero trust principles. So what is zero trust? We initially discussed, right? It assumes that there is no trust. Okay? So I think I have summarized it in the next slide. Yeah. This is the preliminary point in zero trust. Trust is a vulnerability. Okay? You can't just trust. So what do you do? But how do you build a security without trust? So how to achieve or improve security when there is no trust is the old question that zero trust architecture is trying to elaborate. So never trust, rather always validate. Anything you get, any request, you need to have a framework which will validate. No assumption saying that, okay, I served you yesterday, so you are secure, I will serve you today. There is no assumption I served you now from this location. That doesn't mean that I will serve you from another location. So you need to validate all these things. So it's an enterprise network architecture where zero trust principle can be implemented enforced and monitored for secure enterprise network. Okay, the source of threat is pervasive and location independent. See, what happened is that earlier, yeah, this is the right slide to probably to say. Your traditional approach for securing network was what? You have a external network, then you have your own network, you have firewall or whatever sort of device, and this traffic is called north-south traffic, right? Traffic that is coming from your external network to the local area network, or now we would call it as an enterprise network, not local area network. It is a large-scale corporate network, right? For example, if you assume this is VIT, this could be V8. I mean, there would be a point to probably to differentiate. It is VIT Chennai. I mean, old VIT. So once you get inside, this is the within the enterprise traffic, right? And this is the traffic entering into VIT. This is the traffic that is moving. The traffic that is moving from Vellore campus to Chennai campus will fall under this category, not under this category. Okay? Yeah. So, Zero Trust says there is no point only on monitoring this traffic. You need to filter or analyze or apply policies, even traffic that is moving laterally within the organization. In fact, Zero Trust also indirectly says, or we could imply that even within one physical server, if you have multiple virtual servers, and if there is a communication from one virtual server to other virtual server, even that traffic needs to subject to a policy validation. But this looks very funny, right? Can you have a firewall between virtual server 1 and virtual server 2 running on a same physical server? So what do we do? But you can't trust, because in a cloud environment, probably your virtual server 1 is used by somebody, virtual server 2 is used by somebody else. Now, can you allow the traffic from virtual server 1 to virtual server 2 to pass just like that? No. So, what is the solution? So, Zero Trust gives a set of principles and guidelines to deal with that sort of scenario. So, there is something called deploy a soft firewall along with your application, right? Each application when you create something called a sidecar or whatever, and that will get bundled with your application, and then traffic will be passed through that policy framework. So here's a very simple notion of Zero Trust architecture, which is actually taken from the Zero Trust architecture paper, not a research publication, but it's actually sort of a technical report published by NIST, which says that the entity which originates the request is actually your subject, which can be a user, device, or an application, right? User is typically used to refer human person. Device is like, for example, your IoT device. A request can originate from your device without any human intervention or something. And it could even be an application, right? Requesting something. Irrespective of that, irrespective of the location, that needs to go through a policy framework, right? And this is a more elaborate framework. How do you get it done and done? This I think we already discussed. So not only your north-south traffic, your east-west traffic should also pass through Zero Trust framework policy enforcement point. Yeah. So I think with this I am sort of coming to my last slide, which I think somebody during the tea break also asked here about possibility of interacting with our researchers and scientists. So we have a program called SPARK, which stands for Student Program for Advancement in Research Knowledge. So those who have enrolled for a degree in any institution here, college or whatever, all over the India, can come to us through the SPARK program. We will provide you training, internship, and training this one along with the guidance. And you can also have a guide from your college. And the typical expectation is at least publication of a paper, a good quality paper in a research peer-reviewed journal, right? So anybody who is interested can do. It's a very flexible framework. All you need is to be eligible, open to all students of all discipline who are formally enrolled for a higher degree and carrying out their thesis work. If you wanted to do a BTech thesis or a BTech project or an MTech thesis, or even if you are doing a PhD in a different institute and you wanted to come and spend some time with us and do research on any of the topic of interest to mutual interest, you are welcome and you could do that. The complete online, the complete application process is online. So it's a tri-party collaboration model we call, because we have scientists at our side, we have faculty on the respective universities, and we have students, which is the nucleus, right? So of course, in this particular case, the nucleus will keep changing because as the new batches come, but probably these two sides will be relatively more static, guide from the college as well as the guide from our institute. And it was a very effective. We have tried it out with the VIT and we have done it with many institutions in India now, and quite useful and helpful. So those who join will get an access to our high performance computing, petaflop level supercomputing on a need basis, of course. And then you also get an access to, if it is related to cybersecurity, you get an access to our cybersecurity test bed, and you can do a wide variety of experiments on that. Okay, packet capturing, analysis, darknet, network telescope, all sort of stuff. So yeah, if somebody is interested, they can make use and come out with at least one publication in the process. So I think with that I can conclude here. Probably we are slightly early, but next 10 minutes, if you have any questions, we can address that. Yeah, please.
Sir, this what you are MPDCP, has it found any applications in say a one-party computation or other distributed networks as such, or like is there any way you can use it in that aspect?
See, another point which I probably missed to say in my presentation. One thing I said that, okay, MPTCP is designed in such a manner that it can pass through middle box without any problem because it is TCP. Another beauty of that design is that it uses the same socket interface as TCP uses. So all application can use MPTCP without any change to the application. So you can use MPTCP for your web server, you can use MPTCP for your huge data transfer, any of those things without making any modification to the application, right? Because you still use the same open socket call, bind, write, read. The MPTCP layer that is sitting below, he makes sure that the stuff is done, congestion control is done, data sequence signal is prepared correctly, subflows are dynamically created, subflows are dynamically terminated. It's a beautiful protocol. That is why I think the design took several years, not 1 or 2 years. Now the final RFC is out, I think last 2 years. Yeah. And more implementation is coming up. From this side? No question.